There is one Resident Evil team that has been sitting in front of Capcom for years. Somehow the series has never really given us a full version of it, which is Chris Redfield and Leon fighting side by side in a mainline game. See, they have actually crossed paths before, most famously in Resident Evil 6, but that wasn't the partnership fans imagined. The meetings was pretty brief, it was tense, tied to the game's story, while the two characters mostly just followed their own campaigns then. See, if Capcom really wanted to make the 10th numbered game feel like a major event, putting Chris and Leon together would be one of the easiest ways to just make it feel special without inventing another giant gimmick, per se. The thing is, right now Resident Evil X is not officially announced, and Capcom has not confirmed that Chris and Leon will be the leads of that game. What we do have is a lot of fan discussion, some reporting and speculations around Resident Evil 10, and one very interesting story connection coming out of Resident Evil Requiem. Capcom officially calls Requiem the 9th game, the 9th mainline game, and its story follows Grace alongside Leon as Kennedy, so the idea of Chris and Leon finally sharing the spotlight in the next mainline game is still something to take sort of with a grain of salt, but it also ain't coming from nowhere. The ending of Requiem is where things get especially interesting. You see, Chris himself doesn't become a playable character in the game, but his Hound Wolf squad is involved in the story and helps Leon and Grace escape the Ark. One report looking at the ending points out that Leon specifically mentions Chris and suggests they may cross paths again, which is exactly the kind of small story detail that gets Resident Evil fans thinking about what Capcom could be preparing for like the 10th game. Honestly, that's where Capcom's sort of heading. Like, I would rather see them go all the way with it. Like, imagine the first few minutes of the game opening with Leon somewhere completely different from where Chris is operating. Leon is following a lead connected to the new biological weapon, while Chris and his team are dealing with an outbreak that just looks unrelated. Both investigations seem separate first, with different locations, with different enemies and completely different reasons for just being there. Then the player slowly realizes that the two cases are connected there. That's when the game brings them together. You see, not with some giant superhero entrance or whatever, just Leon walking into a room, seeing Chris standing on the other side, both of them just realizing that they've finally ended up on the same job. That would be enough, the personalities alone could just carry some fantastic scenes together. Leon has become dry, experienced government agent who's been seeing just about everything and still manages to throw out a sarcastic comment when things become ridiculous, and Chris has become the hardened soldier who's spent decades just fighting biological weapons and watching people around him disappear. They aren't the same kind of character, which is exactly why putting them together could just work well. Chris, charges forward, Leon takes a second to think, Chris says something blunt, Leon makes a joke, then something enormous crashes through the walls and they both start shooting. That's Resident Evil. The biggest mistake, in fact, Capcom could make in this case would be just turning the whole thing into another Resident Evil 6. That game had some fantastic great ideas, but its action became so large and constant that the survival horror side of the series often disappeared underneath explosions, military battles and whatever, and increasingly these ridiculous set pieces. A Chris and Leon game doesn't need to become a non-stop action movie per se. In fact, it would be much more exciting if Capcom just found the middle ground that Resident Evil Requiem has already shown can work. Requiem deliberately mixes fear with action, and Capcom says the game was built around that balance. It also lets players switch between first and third person perspectives, while Leon gameplay is designed around a much more action heavy experience than Grace's sections. So, that section could be perfect for a future game where Chris and Leon have clearly different strengths without making either character feel like a copy of the other one. Like, Leon could remain the more agile fighter, where he moves quickly, uses his pistol with precision, handles close combat pretty well, and knows how to just stay alive when everything around him is falling apart. Chris, meanwhile, could feel stronger and more direct without turning him into a human tank. Like, he could carry heavier weapons, break through certain obstacles, handle larger enemies, and use military equipments that Leon doesn't have access to even. The important thing is that both of these characters should feel vulnerable still. Like, a giant creature should need 10 minutes of bullets simply because Chris is standing in front of it. Sometimes a smarter move, should be running. Sometimes the best weapon should be the environment itself. And sometimes Leon and Chris should be separated, leaving the player alone in a dark building with nothing, just a flashlight and some empty magazines or whatever. That balance would keep the horror alive. The world itself could also be much larger than what we've been seeing before without becoming an open world game per se. One region could be an isolated European town where this outbreak has turned the streets into a maze of abandoned buildings and underground tunnels or whatever, and another could be a remote military facility hidden in the mountains somewhere else. The player could just move through an enormous research complex built beneath the city. And each place, of course, should have its own identity. The European town could feel old and cold, the military base could be harsh, industrial, and the laboratory could become increasingly strange the deeper you go. See, Chris and Leon could also be split apart for larger sections of the game. That might actually be better than having them stand next to each other for the entire campaign. Give Leon a horror-focused section where he is investigating the source of an outbreak, then switch to Chris dealing with military side of the same crisis. Players slowly see pieces of the bigger picture from two different perspectives. Eventually, their stories collide. That structure then would also let Capcom bring back something the series has always done pretty well: different kinds of fear. Capcom's already clearly shown that it understands how important the balance is when it comes to series. Resident Evil Requiem became the fastest game in the series to reach 6 million units. According to Capcom, and the company specifically highlighted the combination of intense fear and the action as part of the game's experience. That success gives Capcom plenty of reason to continue mixing the old horror with the modern action that longtime characters like Leon and Chris naturally bring. And then there is another reason the next game could become even more important. Capcom has already officially announced a Resident Evil Code Veronica for next year. That means the company is continuing to build the older side of the series while also moving forward with new mainline stories. If the remake lands well, Chris and Claire's history will be fresh in the mind of players again, making Chris's possible return to a future mainline game even more meaningful now. Code Veronica brings Chris back into focus, Requiem continues Leon's story, Resident Evil X brings them together, and that feels like a good plan. And if Capcom actually wants the 10th mainline game to feel like a celebration of everything Resident Evil has become, this is probably the cleanest way to do it. Give us the horror, the monsters, the old locations and new ones, the puzzles, the limited resources again, big action moments when they actually matter, but most importantly give us Chris and Leon a real story together. Not a short needing a separate campaign that happened to have just overlap together. Let them investigate the same outbreak, let them argue about how it handles, let them save each other, let them fight something neither one can actually handle alone. And then let them walk away from it knowing that after all these years they finally became the team fans always imagined. In fact, if Capcom really is planning to make the next major chapter for these characters, there's an easy way to make it feel bigger without making it bloated. Don't just give us another outbreak, give us the two men who have spent decades fighting the same nightmare finally fighting it together. That could make Resident Evil X feel like something much more important than just another game. It could feel like the beginning of the next era of the Resident Evil games.